Hi, my name is Cheryl Brunette, and thank you for stopping by my knitting channel, where you will find tips and techniques, complete workshops, and answers to your most perplexing sweater questions. Thank you for stopping by this special episode 9.5. It's a bonus episode. Last week I showed you how to make this little mitered square. It's out of garter stitch. And then I showed you how to pick up along the top of this square and cast on some more stitches so that you could make an identical square right above it. Well, this week I'm going to take it further. I'm going to show you how to sequence an entire blanket, where you would start, where you would add squares, the order in which you would do things. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how I'm putting together this actual work in progress, which is an Afghan for my son and his beloved Bethany. This is the original pattern that I used. I printed it out from the website. This is a crocheted pattern, and this is how I figured out how many stitches I was going to use. This is the one I'm actually working from now. My printer ran out of red ink, and so it wasn't very useful, but now all I have is the colors identified here. The first square I worked in this Afghan is the one in the lower left corner. Technically, I could have started in any one of these corners. However, I am an English major and I spend a lot of my time reading, and I do that from left to right. So reading the chart for the Afghan in that same direction feels both comfortable and familiar to me, and that's why I chose to do it that way. Now remember, this is a work in progress, so here's a little end that needs to be worked in, but this large square is this one right here. So I began by casting on 101 stitches using a long tail cast on. Started my cast on here, went around well, it wasn't a corner, it was just straight then, and I ended up here. Now that's when I decided that my first row would be a wrong side row, and I would mark the middle 3 stitches on my way back. Now that's a choice, and it's a choice I almost always make, that the first row after a long tail cast on is a wrong side row, whether I'm making a sweater, a blanket, a cowl, anything. And that's because I like this more knit looking side. Here's a clearer example of why I like to make that first row a wrong side row. It's because I want this side to the public. This other side, after a long tail cast on, looks more pearly to me. It doesn't look as finished. This is just a little seed stitch thing that I put at the end of this swatch. But see how that looks? It's kind of ropey and clear and nice. So that's why I always make my first row a wrong side row after a long tail cast on. Once I cast on and did my first wrong side row, where I marked the center 3 stitches, then I worked it back and forth just like I showed you in the last episode until I got to here, and it was a discrete square. Now next I did, let me pull this so that you can see it both on the paper and on the Afghan. I went to this color next. Here's my first square, and I remember I'm reading from left to right. So I cast on with a long tail cast on, and then I picked up all of my stitches that I need to there, and I worked it back and forth and made a second square. Now you can see when I got to the third square, which is this one, I didn't have to cast anything on because I already had edges to pick up from. So I picked up 25 stitches here, a 26th stitch in that corner, and then I went up that way to finish it. Again, I worked it back and forth this way until I was there. Next square, I cast on 25 stitches, picked that up, picked those up, worked it back and forth. Again, this one, I didn't have to cast on anything because I already had pieces to pick up from. So I picked up there, I picked up there, worked it back and forth. Next comes this is called Aurora. Isn't that just some fabulous? And you're actually seeing some fairly accurate colors here. This seems to be reading pretty carefully, the camera. I'm on this big square now. We've worked those 5. And this time, of course, I had to cast on again. Let me move up. Cast that on, picked up all the stitches that I needed there, and worked that back and forth till I was done. And then the last 4 squares were just like these other 4 squares over here. You know, I did 1, 2, 3, and 4. And on these bottom ones, I had to cast on, and on these ones, the top 2, I didn't have to. You can see that this is a work in progress. We have little pieces of paper and strings hanging. Okay, here we are. Now, once I get onto the second tier or row of squares, this is where things changed a little. Instead of casting on first, like I did down in the first tier or the first row of squares, I picked up first and then I cast on. This is what I showed you in episode 9, how to do that really handsome knitted cast on. It's got a nice edge. It's very similar to a long tail cast on in its look, so that it really matches the rest of the pattern. Though in this, you know, it's hard to see. This is kind of a fuzzy yarn and it's really highly colored and textured, so you don't notice the cast on very well, but you might in some other circumstances. So I picked up, I cast on, and worked this back and forth. Then I did this one next. I could have done that one next. It wouldn't matter, but again, I cast on. No, I guess I did this one next. It doesn't matter, because I like to keep it as solid as possible as I'm working it. So I picked up and worked it back and forth. Then I picked up, cast on, worked it back and forth, picked up, worked it back and forth. The next large square, we are now there on the pattern, is all picking up, because you have these squares done and you have those squares done, and you're working back and forth. You probably have started to see a pattern. I always start creating each square in its lower right-hand corner with the foundation row. Now that row can be all cast on, as in the case of this very first square, or it can be cast on and then picked up, or it can be picked up and then cast on, or it can be, if you do all your squares right, picked up entirely. Once you can see yourself creating this foundation row, this edge first, it becomes pretty clear what you have to do when it's time to get the next square started. You can see if, well, I can't start this one until I get these two up. I can't start this one until I get this one up, and I can't do this one until that one's up. So I always am working from this left side and going over. This is one of the diagrams I showed you in the last episode of a fairly complex design. And now I'm going to show you the order in which I would build this. I would start right there, casting on, this has 16 stitches, but I'm not going to give you numbers. I would cast on this side, and I would work it back and forth. And then I would cast on this side and this side, work that back and forth. Then I would do this one. Then I would do this one. Then this one, here, here, and here. Now notice that would give me all of these along this edge, so that now I could pick up the larger in this small section. I would be picking up and working that back and forth. Then I would have a whole side to work this square. Cast on 48 plus that extra one, and then pick up another 48, work back and forth. Next square is this one. Probably I would do my next square as this one. This one's cast on and picked up, this one's picked up and picked up. Once you get a sense of how you pick it up, always going in that direction, it's a lot simpler than it looks. Putting them together square is not the only way to put these mitered squares together. You can put them together as diamonds or diagonals, but just for now, I'm teaching you how to do it as rectangles and squares. You don't have to make squares of different sizes in order to make a really interesting blanket. You can use all the same size squares, just different colors, or even the same color. I actually saw a picture of one that was all done in the same color, and it had a very architectural, structural look to it, and it was really kind of classy. But get out a piece of square graph paper and your crayons and spend an afternoon coloring like you did when you were a kid, and you'll be surprised at the fun designs that you'll be able to come up with. I made this episode today in response to some questions that I had on the last episode. People understood how to make the squares, but they wanted to know more about how to build out the blanket, how to attach all of them. So I was happy to answer those questions by making this episode. Likewise, if you have any questions about this episode or something that you want clarified about any episode on this channel, make a comment below and I'll see what I can do to help you. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that you can be the first one in your neighborhood to know when a new episode goes up. And until I see you again, be brave and enjoy your knitting. Hi! Here we go, no contacts again, but I can see the flashing red light. There's a flashing red light. Ooh, my nose itches, means I'm gonna kiss a fool. Matronly, looking matronly. 65 years of sagging.